The widely common known Indonesian food, bakmi, creates an iconic representation of how non-halal foods can still be recognized as a cultural identity in Indonesia. The country that has a majority only accept halal culture due to the majority of beliefs and spirituality. For instance, the food has been famously known in the Chinese Indonesian community, where it is being served in a soup style, being fried, or any type of fusion, and most people not realizing the origins and philosophy of the food that actually came from the country that has the biggest population in the world. Meanwhile, it creates a question on how bakmi from a non-halal origins is able to be transformed and accepted into one of the halal identity cultures of Indonesia.
The Chinese wheat-based food has been around since 206 BC when the Han Dynasty were currently ruling in China, with one of the most famous styles being cooked as a soup noodle with vegetables, oil-based soup, and some meat, either chicken or pork. This recipe became one of the most standards on how noodles are served. Moreover, there are philosophies behind the noodles recipe, in which one of the most known is how this food symbolizes eternity or long-lasting life that cannot be forgotten by every noodle chef, especially in East Asia as a culture. These elements spread around the globe that Chinese noodles are starting to emerge from Western countries such as in Europe and the United States.
As history continues, the fast migration spread of Chinese society has made their cultures being acknowledged by the world, especially in Indonesia, as the Chinese Indonesian community started to emerge during the Dutch East Indies colonialism, specifically in the early 20th century. An Indonesian author named Aji Pramokusumo argued that the majority of Indonesian culinary has a big influences by the Chinese culinary, in which he wrote in the book titled Peranakan Tionghoa dalam Kuliner Nusantara. Soy sauce comes from China. It is just that sweet characteristic is in Java that creates sweet soy sauce. Quoted from Pramokusumo, 2013. This supports the idea of how Indonesians are able to understand Chinese culture in terms of cuisine. This led to the transformation from Chinese noodles to bakmi, with different varieties of styles inspired by how the food spread to the location. For example, noodles that reached to the region of Aceh turned into mie Aceh that has a similar recipe or style, with the only differences being the halal certified ingredients or elements, especially in the meat element, in which the majority of Chinese recipe uses pork-based meat, while in Indonesia are being substituted either chicken, cow, or goat. On the other hand, there are still some parts of the Indonesian regions that still use the non-halal recipe with only specific target for the Chinese Indonesian community. This, arguably, was one of Indonesia's cultural identities that faced a big transformation in terms of race in the perspective of culinary and cuisine.
Bakmi grew in popularity in Indonesia. The reason for bakmi's popularity is because noodles were an essential food for people in China. Between the 17th century and the early 20th century, a lot of Chinese immigrants settled in Java, more specifically Semarang, to trade, and during that time, they introduced noodles to Indonesians. Today, the food can be found in nearly every restaurant in every city throughout Indonesia. The reason for its popularity is largely credited to its simple recipe, cheap price, and great taste.
In conclusion, despite its non-halal origins, Chinese immigrants introduced bakmi to Indonesia and have since adjusted its ingredients to conform to Indonesian culture. Bakmi has been accepted by Indonesians as part of Indonesian culture due to its great taste and cheap price, which will only help it grow in popularity for generations to come.